Chapter 21. Monday morning. Doreen sat back and pondered that. I guess it's possible he did run away successfully, she said. But you know the stats as well as I do that men and women in vulnerable parts of society don't have the greatest chance at longevity. And with a suspicious disappearance like this, of course? Unless he's cleaned up somewhere in the last 10 years, which would be great, but there's a high chance he hasn't. His body has yet to be found though, Peter argued. I mean, I know in my heart of hearts that he's probably gone because he would have contacted me during these last 10 years, but there's always hope. And that's something you might have to come to terms with, she said. If I do find out what happened and we do find him, it could be that he's dead, and then that hope is gone. Peter sighed. I know, but not knowing is worse. I keep expecting him to show up around the corner every time I look somewhere. And even though it's been a decade, and I know the chances of him coming back and showing up like that are pretty non-existent, I still hope. Part of me knows if he did get out, he'd never come back. I wouldn't want to. It's hard to say again, Doreen said, hating that Peter was hurting over this again. The best thing you can do is focus on you, and try to get yourself to wherever you need to be. I know, he said. But at the same time, it's one of those things you never quite let go of. Exactly, she said. And that's why I'm looking into it. He rang off just then. Doreen sat at the kitchen table and read the letter attachment he'd sent her. Dear Peter, she read. I know I've said this time and time again, but this time it's for real. I've got a way to get out. I want to leave all this behind. He's a good man. He's honest and true. He's somebody I trust. I know this is for the best. I promise when I get clean and healthy, I'll come back. Always with love, Manny. It even had his signature at the end. The letter was heartbreaking. Doreen downloaded it and then wrote an email to Mac and sent it to him. As she sat here, studying her garden, she wondered what it would be like to lose somebody you were so close to like that. It had to be devastating. Then she had to wonder if the letter had anything to do with it. Had the police considered one of her Johns as one of their suspects? When Mac phoned a few minutes later, he said, I've never seen that before. She hesitantly told him about her meeting with Peter, and him finding the letter in his backpack and sending it to her. Wouldn't it be nice if these people would give us this information at the time when the crime was fresh and leads were hot? Mac complained. Peter's the one who contacted me this morning with the letter. Right, Mac said. That still doesn't mean he didn't make this up himself. Why would he though? She asked as she studied the letter on her laptop. It looks pretty scraggly. Exactly. It's so hard to identify the handwriting. He was a drug addict, Doreen argued. I'm sure his handwriting changed on any given day. Maybe. I don't know what handwriting experts would say about something like that. He sighed. Fatigue was in his voice again. Did you get any sleep last night? She demanded. That call that took you away doesn't sound like you ever went back to bed. I've gotten a few hours, but not too many. Will you tell me what it's all about? Nope, he said briskly. Keep your nose out of my business. Can you take a look into Manny's file and see if the license plate letter Y was ever mentioned? What Y? That's what Peter told me. It was a big black truck with those crosshatch pattern metal step-up sides and matching bed liner, and the letter Y was the last letter on the license plate. Mac wrote it down and said, I'll have to check the file. It's not a lot to go on. No, Doreen said, but given the type of truck and the license plate, surely not more than a couple hundred of them are here. Probably something like that. Maybe even less. It's something to consider. Also, what about Norbert? Norbert Watkins, the manager from the bank downtown? What about him? Mac asked in exasperation. The name means nothing to me. So tell me about Norbert. He was a regular John of Manny's, once a week without fail, she said. And he worked around the corner. I asked if maybe they had more of a friendship than a sexual relationship, but Peter seemed to think he was a John. But Manny grew to care about him. Did he say why? No. Thinking about it now, it was probably a way to make their jobs and daily life easier. We all try to laugh about everything in life, Max said. Sometimes it's just a nervous reaction, and sometimes it's as a way to deal with the hardship. Oh, Peter also said Norbert died in a car accident. Okay. Let me check that name, Max said as he typed on his laptop. I hate to admit it, but my first thought was that it was very convenient. Convenient. Yes, Doreen said. Convenient that he's dead. Are you thinking he's a suspect in Manny's disappearance? Well, if he was a regular person in Manny's life, you'd think that he would have been investigated. I'm pretty sure Peter was investigated pretty heavily, Max said, because he was the closest person in Manny's life. Then Doreen heard some more clicks before Max said, Okay, I've got the file. It says he was killed in a hit-and-run car accident. So, was he in a vehicle at the time or was he walking on the street? He was crossing the road downtown on Bernard at the end of the workday, but a bit late, around 6 o'clock. He was struck by a vehicle. Nobody saw anything? Apparently not, he said. His voice was suspiciously bland. You know what people are like. They don't want to say anything. How long ago was that? 10 years ago, Max said, and then he stopped. Damn. What's damn? Well, that's about the same time Manny went missing. Right. So was that death faked? Do we have any way to identify that body and make sure it was him? You're saying he faked his death and took off with her? I don't know what I'm saying, Doreen said, but do we have a positive ID on the body? I believe so. I have to find the autopsy reports. She heard mumbling and clicking in the background. His wife identified his body, and one of his employees came upon the body soon afterward. So he wasn't alone after working late at night? Apparently this employee had gone across the street to have dinner, and when he came outside, he found his boss lying on the street. So it definitely was Norbert who died, Doreen said with a clipped nod. Good. We need some facts here. What? Max said in a drawl. Is that you talking facts and not just theories? You actually want evidence? Not so much evidence, she said. Facts. And I wanted to know for sure Norbert was dead, and he wasn't the designer behind Manny's disappearance. You can't know that though, can you? Because Norbert might have had something to do with Manny's death and then was killed. Or something to do with Manny's disappearance if you're thinking he's still alive, he said, but even his tone said it was doubtful. I'm not really expecting him to be alive because of his line of work. We all know what a dangerous lifestyle that is. Unfortunately, yes. But anyway, this Norbert guy is dead. Can you give me a copy of that file, so I don't have to write down all my notes? No, he said. You can do a search for it, and you'll probably get a newspaper article on it because he was a bank manager. Fine, she said. Can you check on Manny's case file to see if anything there mentions Norbert and that Y in the license plate? I will, Max said, but I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. I've got to go. And he hung up on her. Doreen groaned, but figured he'd get back to her when he could. Hopefully he will, she said. She sat at her laptop and looked for articles on Norbert's death. And sure enough, found a couple. Mostly hit-and-run news where nobody was ever caught. Looks like it's right up my alley, Doreen said. This is another cold case indeed.